to Spill the Tarot Tea. I am Krista Flute of Anti-K's Tarot. I'm an Indigenous tarot reader and deck creator, and I am here today talking with Nailah. Nailah, can you tell us who you are?
Hi, my name is Nailah. I'm a tarot reader in love with all things occult and spiritual. I'm here in Jabuktuk, here with Auntie K to spill the tea.
All right, I'm so excited about doing this with you. So let's get into the very first thing. What is in your tea today?
I'm very basic. I grew up drinking like those Tetley packets of regular, I don't know what the tea is, but those like red rose teas. So that's all I'm drinking with no cream, no milk. It's just sugar and my basic ass tea.
Very nice. I'm actually drinking instant coffee today. It's Nescafé French vanilla instant coffee with some sugar in it. When I think about it, sorry. When I drink this, I think about an ex I had she was Lebanese, and she said at home, people call Nescafe American coffee. That's what they think everybody in America drinks, which says a lot about what they think about our coffee.
Yeah. I mean, the French vanilla is really good, though. I'll say that.
It is.
For instant coffee, it's really good.
Yeah, that's right. For instant coffee, it's really good. It's just me. There's no point to perking coffee. So, yeah. All right. So, Nailah, we would love to hear, what is your hot tarot take?
What is my hot tarot take? It's definitely on the Emperor. Can you see that?
Nice.
Yes. So I've been going through a journey when it comes to Saturn in particular. It's my Saturn return right now. I'm still in it.
Nice.
In probably another 2 years. It's been rough. But I was reading and watching a lot of this person I follow online who, her name is Priestess Aset, something. Anyways, she has kind of challenged me to stop thinking of the Emperor as the typical masculine figure that we always kind of associate like the Emperor and Saturn to be. And she's kind of asked us to kind of see that as more of the mother, the very strict, the very almost a taskmaster mother. So instead of seeing this as the Emperor as like a male masculine figure, which I think we still have to like work around how we even see masculine and feminine energy in our decks and whether or not we need that at all. But I think when we look at the Emperor, it is more of a very kind but very stern grandmother who is trying to help us along our journey, and also making us understand that in this journey, there are rules of the land, there are rules of the way life should flow together. And to disrupt that flow is only going to hurt us. So I think for me, that hot take is the Emperor. And instead of, I know it's not the Empress, it's the counterpart, but this is more of the grandmother figure for me. And it's kind of been helping me and guiding me by seeing the mother and Saturn as more of the grandmother, helping me learn and grow as opposed to the very stern and strict, father or grandfather who, in many ways, is cruel. And I no longer want to see the Emperor as that. And I feel like as people talk about even the Saturn return, that's kind of the energy and that's what they kind of express. And yeah, that's my hot take. This is the grandmother, not.
I like that. The Emperor in my deck, I changed to yesterday's foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And I was inspired by the aunties and the uncles in my life who, have all those lessons for us. I like that. Yeah. And I also am thinking now of a traditional grandmother who I knew for years in my life, grandmother Bonnie. And when I first met grandmother Bonnie, my first 3 years, like I was really taken aback by this woman, and then grew to love her, because those emperor qualities that she had, she used them to like emphasize really important lessons that seemed really difficult, but like they were filled with love, and we needed to figure them out. She was just blunt. But grandmother Bonnie was definitely more positive emperor vibes than empress vibes. But grandmother to the end. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, like I think anything with love is going to always never be as harsh or never be as cruel. And I think even now when we think of Saturn and how Saturn has been so abused, I think we talked about this last time about how Saturn is so abused, and how it's the very destructive, cruel streak of Saturn that kind of has been popping up, and that's kind of what's been guiding our world, especially with the way that we see how harsh systems and governments are kind of on us, the people, that it's supposed to be, nurturing and helping grow. But yeah, without that love, without that concern, the emperor just becomes so cruel. That energy becomes so cruel. Yeah.
And responsibility can feel so harsh and difficult. That's one of the things that Saturn draws us to. And responsibility actually is where freedom lies. When the colonizers take our freedom, they do so by taking our ability to be responsible for ourselves, for our lives, in so many ways. And so I think responsibility as being one of those difficult but vital lessons in a search for freedom and decolonization.
And even like when we see, I find with this system of governance that comes from colonized people or colonizers, it's that this idea that none of us are at fault, as in like it's not our responsibility and our concern to care for others or to care for things, to care for the land, to care for each other, to care for the community. It's almost like, or we kind of give it all, like we kind of in giving our autonomy, we also give that responsibility up to them, because they, these colonizer institutions, like they're the ones who are now taking care of our sick and our elderly. They're taking care of, everybody. What was I going to say? Even our prisoners too, or people that we consider people who have kind of strayed from the path that they should be. All the responsibility is kind of pushed onto them, and then that is taking our own personal sense of responsibility, because we should all be taking care of each other, but we give it in the hands of very corrupt, very terrible, very clueless in many ways people who then kind of run the show. And in many ways we kind of just like put our hands up in the air and be like, well, that's not our responsibility.
Governing our lives isn't our responsibility,
which is
but we want freedom.
Yeah, right. You can't have one without the other. You have to. That's why the idea, like even with decolonizing your own spirit and decolonizing your own path, it has to be all on you. Like it has to be your desire and your will pushing that forward, or else you just give it up. And there's so many ways to give that up. Yeah. Anyway, that's my hot take on the emperor. A lot of ways.
That is an awesome hot take. My hot take is the Six of Pents. Ooh. I've pulled a Next World Tarot for this, because some of my thoughts on this card came from Chrissy C. Road naming this redistribution.
Oh, I like that.
I do too. And its astrological assignment is Moon in Taurus. And the moon's all about our emotions. And so in this, and in redistribution, and in thinking about the moon's role in this earthy placement and in the Six of Pents, I think it calls us to think about our emotions and our humanity. in these six of pence moments in redistribution. And that becomes a difference between charity and mutual aid, right? Our emotional attachment to the idea of what we own, what we've earned, what we have. We have huge emotional attachments to it, and to why we do or don't deserve these, why we deserve these things, why others might not deserve these things. And so I feel like the six of pence calls on us to like look at our emotional attachment to these things. And also when I think about the six of pence following the five of pence, I similarly think about our emotional ability to let go. Because in the five of pence, you know, we've been hurt and there's been loss. And then you move to the six of pence. Where's your emotional attachment to letting go of that and moving into like a different space, in a different connection to your needs? So yeah, that's my thought on the six of pence or the six of coins, that there's a huge emotional undertone that we need to think about and consider.
That's a great hot take. And it makes me think of redistributing. Like when I get my paycheck, when I get paid, you know, all the work that I put in the week, you know, getting up, doing all my efforts, all that stuff, and I get that paycheck, it's always like, well, how am I redistributing this? And I always get into the walls of how much can I give to others without taking from myself. And I think right now we have a terrible relationship with the way that we redistribute at all in general, whether it's giving too much and having nothing for yourself, or giving, you know, not enough. But not enough people are having that conversation with themselves about like, how am I redistributing this? Instead of calling it like paying, redistribute, how am I I can't say the word, redistributing my energy that I kind of accumulated over these X amount of times. So yeah, I like that. I have to get.
And you bring up a great point that it can go the other way. You can give too much without looking after yourself, and that is really an emotional Taurus relationship. Either way, you know. Yeah, that is a great addition to that. I will keep that in mind.
I also think a lot about Taurus and how people consider Taurus kind of selfish in that they only move when they want to move. They only give when they want to give. And it's more like they are at peace with that, understanding that if they have nothing, they're not going to give. Like, why? What's the point in giving what they can't give? They can't give 100. Why give? Because Taurus are actually naturally hard workers. Like that's the energy of work, of you know, home, of building and create, like, yeah, building things up. A Taurus isn't going to give until a Taurus is ready to give or can give. And even emotionally too, like they're not going to budge.
I think there are probably those Tauruses that have that huge like mothery, nurturing energy, where your point becomes really valid about giving too much. And in a parental Taurus role, we can definitely not think about what our own needs are and give too much too. And that is an emotional issue too. Absolutely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So let's get into the big shit. What is your pet spiritual Karen peeve?
What is my pet? Oh, I have so many. I do, because like I consistently think about like, I hate this, I hate that. I mean, not that that's the only energy flowing from that, but it's like there's a lot of stuff wrong in the wider spiritual community, a lot, and the smaller ones as well. But there's just so many bad takes and bad roots. I think the most offending one for me is not respecting where things come from. And that's a thing about that comes from just colonized perspectives, is that they, like, colonizers do not respect the home where things were born and where it comes from. It's always a I'm like pick and pick and pick and pick. I'm going to pick from here. And that's my grip with Wicca in general, because to me it just seems like it's a very colonized practice. And I'm sure there's people who practice who aren't colonized or don't think like that. But to me, it's just you're just picking and picking and picking without really giving homage to the proper channels, or you're not even going to these places to understand where these come from. Because in many ways, at least in my spiritual practice, spirituality it comes from my roots. It comes from what people have been doing through me, through my lineage for so long. I can't just take that and then run with it and then act as if that like there's nothing behind that, that there's not like a whole history that I should learn and kind of cement myself and ground myself in and understand. Because also spiritual practices are stories too of people. So to just erase that completely and then just run with it, it's so disrespectful. And I feel like that's kind of why we, like in general in the world, especially in these westernized world, that things are crumbling, because it's like there's no respect for the where things come from, the origins, like the stories, the lessons. We're not sitting down and speaking with people anymore. It's more like, I read this article in 2 weeks and now I'm this person now. And it's like that's you in many ways. You don't call yourself things, you earn the title through that work. And that's just my pet peeve with all the spiritual community. It's like there's none of that. Nobody's learning about the history of, I don't know, why, or everything is coming through also a colonized lens. So it's like you have to really dig and go deep and find the truth and then come from that. But it just seems like that's not a priority for a lot of people. Yeah.
I am so on that, and I'm going to grab a book. Yeah, a lot of books are just like, this is how you do this. This is how you do this. And it's like, where did this come from?
Exactly.
And I had a curiosity about where did so many things come from. I'm a huge history buff. So I read some histories and autobiographies on various white folks involved in getting Wicca going, like Crowley and Garner and some others. And then I found this book, which is called Occult Chronological Journey of Alchemy and Wicca by John Michael Greer. So what I ended up loving about this chronology is it lays out what I effing thought. And that is that Wicca is really, Crowley was into the occult. And when you go through the history of the occult in Europe, it is a combination of upper class white men and, ironically, the church, the Catholic Church, collecting esoteric practices, spiritual understandings from throughout the African, Arab, and Asian worlds, and putting them through their own understandings. Egyptology is a good example of that. Like, Egyptology is just white people fantasizing about Egypt.
I hate talking about Egypt because it's also a colonized land. That the original people there, whatever kind of came out of that colonized, whatever you hear about now is literally a colonized perspective. It's
Back to this, that's what it is. And when you trace back the roots of that, it's a stolen religion. Why? Because like in the 1400s, they attacked their own traditional practitioners and drove them underground and attacked them. And a couple 400 years later comes along these upper middle class white people from an occult tradition, not a European magic tradition, and this becomes Wicca. I also think it's insanely sad that there seems to be no recognition that occultism does not have European roots, and it has ignored European
Yes,
traditions, and that is hugely sad.
it is.
But it does create all these rubber-beating issues throughout the esoteric world and into tarot, which itself did not come from Europe.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people don't realize tarot is not. Tarot has been done in many different places for way longer than it's ever been known as tarot. Like it is, yeah.
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 Like the rest of the Eastern Hemisphere knew how to make paper and figured out making cards and all this other stuff like long before you. And yeah.
Yeah. No, I like that book. I really want to grab that book.
Yeah, it's really interesting in looking at like the historical progressions in that. But yeah, that and it creates so many issues that come throughout there. And then this idea that, well, I'm drawn to this, so I'm going to practice it. I'm drawn to this, so I'm going to practice it.
Which is, and to me, that feels like an ancestral colonized spirit coming over you, in my opinion. Because to me, it's like, why? Where is this desire to just, I'm drawn to this? What does it mean to be drawn to something? That means something is moving you towards something. And a lot of like white colonized places have never really come to terms with their own ancestral misdeeds. Like they have never actually confronted and actually. Whereas when you talk about breaking generational curses, white people have a lot too. They have to break those curses that their people have done throughout the world, just like how every person has. That thing that's pushing you towards a religion in a particular way that makes you want to like take from it and like in many ways bastardize it. That probably comes from your colonized ancestors, and you need to confront that because you should not have this desire to just, I'm drawn to this, therefore I pick it, and therefore it's mine. And if you say anything about it, oh well, you're just gatekeeping, and you are against spirit, which is it's wild. It's wild.
Yeah. And then if we complain, it can get thrown back. Well, you're using this European tradition. Well, in all likelihood, it was never enough in European tradition. And secondly, appropriation isn't a two-way street.
It's not.
We had to adapt to what was taken from us.
Exactly.
And adapt our practices into the new tools available to us.
Yeah, and I forgot what the conversation I've been having with a lot of people. Yeah, it's about, well, we have a conversation quite often in the Black community about hair and like weaves and wigs and stuff like that, and how, oh well, when you're Black and you wear a European weave, that's the same. It should be okay if white people also wear like dreads and braids and stuff. And it's like that's not the same. One is assimilation. We are forced to do this because our natural hair was demonized and considered bad. So this is a practice that we have to continue and still continue because these things are still happening. Even on the continent, it is still happening where you can't wear natural hair. That's different from you just deciding to wear some braids just because you think it's cool and not just respecting the tradition. It always comes back to just respect. We don't have a choice. We have to conform to the society or we get pushed out and can't succeed. You are just doing it because it's fun and something you can do, which is like, again, very colonial in the thought.
Yeah. And I don't want to hear your respect if you can't respect me enough to listen to me when I say, this isn't okay, this is appropriation, and this is why it hurts. You clearly have no respect if you can't listen to that. So in this conversation of, practices from around the world being taken either by an individual because they're called to it, and I love your interpretation that they're probably being called to it by a colonizer ancestor, or because it's been incorporated and appropriated for a long time. Is there a place where in tarot or in esoteric practices where you're practicing something that comes from your roots and you're told by white folks, no, this is European.
Actually, yes. Because I was having a conversation a long time ago with my dad, and he knows a lot about, so I'm from South Sudan. I'm from the Dinga Hills. It's this very small village that, you know, we're very freshly introduced. And I say freshly, I mean like in the late 90s into, or I guess the early 80s to the mid 90s to European colonizers. We were not colonized up until then. And through then, when my dad was kind of growing up, he learned a lot about, you know, both sides. He got to see the remaining of his, you know, his understanding and his upbringing kind of be colonized in real time. And he talks constantly about Christianity and Catholicism. And he's like, oh yeah, we've always known, oh, these like the 10 commandments. Oh yeah, that's something we always knew. It was just something that the land, we just knew that all these things that were never rules, they were just guidelines that we all kind of had in our hearts and our spirits. That's just how we moved with the land. You know, we respected each other, we respected our neighbors, we respected our parents. There's like this holistic, or I shouldn't say holistic, this like movement of understanding of our place in the earth with the earth and everybody around us. And that's kind of, he said, that's kind of where the 10 commandments came from. Those were always things that we always had. Of course, like, why wouldn't we want to respect all these things? And consistently people talk like, and so when I was learning Catholicism, and I was forced to go to church and, you know, all those processes. When I was trying to explain that we already know this stuff, it was that pushback that said, oh no, that's Catholicism. And you owe that to these white colonizers for even, you know, what is the word? Not taming, but in many ways taming the spirit of us wild people, you know, who lived on the land like how we used to. So that's why I have my own personal terrible relationship with Catholicism and any type of organized religion, especially that comes to the Western world. It's just an always butting heads, because to me, it's like, you are just teaching me what I already knew, wrapping it around, throwing in some patriarchal ideas, throwing in some sexism, throwing in some anti-Blackness, throwing in all these like terrible ideas, spinning it and then giving it back to me. And then saying, this is, we've colonized you and given you a better perspective on this earth. And then, so a lot of my decolonizing has literally been, no, there's a root, the seed of these ideas and this type of spirituality is from us. This is where it comes from. I don't need those filters. I have to kind of strip away that nonsense that the white colonizers have given us and go back to the roots. And that's kind of what I've been doing in my entire practice. But yeah, that's where I see it the most, and I cannot stand like Catholic.
I'm gonna back you up for people who are watching this. So the 10 commandments that Catholicism and Christianity use, as we know, came from Judaism and the Torah, and there are many ancient versions of that throughout the African and